Well, welcome to my workspace. This is the first episode of a new series I'm starting called the Crud Builder. I'm the Crud Builder. My name is Rob. So what we're doing right now is straightening up the shop a little bit, loading some stuff up, and I'll introduce you to what this year's build is going to be a little bit. Won't be a very long video, and it probably won't be a very interesting video, but we will see how we do. So this is a channel pretty much for people that are interested in the hobby of demolition derby. If you're not interested in the hobby of demolition derby, you might still find some entertainment value in this. We typically build weird stuff. So let's just dive right into it. This is going to be the build for this year. We are putting together a demolition derby car. Our promoter is called Go Derby. They usually put on 5 or 6 shows a year, and the car that we are building this year is a 1979 4-door Lincoln Continental. It is a very clean car. It's practically rust-free. The only rust that I've been able to find on it so far is some rust on the back trunk deck, but the frame is super clean. We got a lot of work to do to it, and we haven't done a whole lot because we don't have a set of rules yet for the 2019 year. There may be rules changes, so we are waiting on those. Mostly the car is just stripped at this point and awaiting the rules so that we can really start modifying it and doing things like messing with the frame and messing with the cross member and messing with the how we're going to do our cage and how we're going to do our rear end and our trunk and everything like that. What we have been able to do so far is a few things, mainly things that, you know, aren't specific to the inspection process. I'll cover those in more detail in a future video, but really what I can talk about is what will be powering this car in the 2019 season, which is this right here. This is a small block Chevy, as many of you probably recognize. You've probably seen small block Chevys. You're probably noticing already that there's a lot of extra stuff on this. We have, and this is just kind of a primer on some derby technology that we use. This is, let's just get in here. This is a lower cradle. So our block ties into this lower cradle, and then these ears on the lower cradle will be what attaches to our motor mounts. So here's our lower. A lot of these lowers sometimes will have a pulley protector that comes out. This one does not have one of those. We will have plenty of room between our radiator and our pulley, so we will not need a pulley protector. One of the big problems in derbies is your distributor on the back of a small block Chevy. On your Fords, you know, and Chryslers, they're up here in the front. But what can happen a lot of times is this firewall here on the car, as your car starts to bend and what we call nose upward, this distributor will get smashed against the firewall and then you're out. So you'll see this back plate is what we call a DP, or a distributor protector. It's 3/8 inch thick steel, it goes around the back of the distributor so that when this front of this car starts to nose up, this distributor protector will smush the firewall back, keeping your distributor safe the entire time and keeping you in the heat. So another little piece of derby technology here that I will share with you. So on the firewall, at some point, we'll have to cut a channel here. We won't cut the entire firewall, but we will cut a channel here. Our transmission obviously attaches to the flex plate back here. But you probably have seen on the DP, you have some bolts here that have been welded on, 6 to be exact. Those are to protect our transmission. That's a Turbo 350 transmission. Many of you have probably seen those. But this piece of technology here, this is a transmission brace. This transmission brace will attach into these 6 bolts. And the back of the Turbo 400, if you can see this, hopefully you can. Still working on my camera setup here. The back of this Turbo 400 tail shaft bolts into these 4 bolts, and then these 2 big bolt holes here will bolt in to the cross member, which is underneath the car. Now, what that does is, as your car starts to take hits, the shock of those hits will not be absorbed by the bell housing of the transmission, but instead that shock will be absorbed by this brace here. That force will be absorbed between the DP and the cross member. This brace in the middle will take that force. So how are we gonna get this small block Chevy into this Ford car? That's a good question. We've created these custom motor mounts here that I have now welded to the cross member for the motor. They're just, you know, a cheap set of Speedway Chevy motor mounts that I bought for 40 bucks. And I've taken some 1/4 inch steel and I've kind of closed them completely in, and also welded a couple pieces of gusset on the sides here. And then I've also welded another extra 1/4 inch plate underneath just to give these some height off the cross member. Because one of the challenges you face when you put a Chevy motor into a Ford like this is, you know, your GMs have their steering in the front of the cross member. Fords have what we call rear steer. Here's your steering back here. And so a Ford, the oil pan will dump in front of the cross member. A Chevy dumps behind the cross member. And so you have to have enough height here, or you have to move your motor mounts back some so that your oil pan clears this rear steering. And we've already done that, and that fitting has all been done, and that actually fits in there perfect and clears the rear steering perfectly. Got some steel in here, as you can see. That's going to turn into cage material. Got my core, my fenders, the hood. That's all work that's going to get done later down the road. But this motor is sitting here waiting. I can talk to you a little bit about what I use tools wise if you're interested in getting into derby. Kind of standard stuff, but you have to have a welder. I recommend one that's a 220. I just use this little Hobart Handler 190. It's a great welder. I use it for everything. It's got 7 voltage settings, and you can pretty much weld up to the thickness that we use in derby pretty easily. And I use it for everything. It's a MIG welder. It's easy to learn how to MIG weld. It's harder to master, but you know, my welds are not perfect, but they do hold. And that's really what you want. Remember, this whole derby car here is going to get smashed to pieces. So it doesn't necessarily have to look pretty. It just has to be functional. So other tools, is this, which I use all the time. This beautiful big chop saw that I have here. It's great for cutting this big steel for cages and things like that. Obviously, a nice workbench. This one I made out of steel, and I can weld on it, grind on it, and do whatever I want on it. I use my vise a lot. Wrenches, everything that a mechanic might need. Some drills. And really, one thing you're going to use a ton is Mr. Angle Grinder here. You know, for grinding, to get clean welds, for cutting, you know, pieces of steel, things like that. What else can I really share with you? I don't want to make this video too long, but yeah, maybe we'll just a good drill press. I use this one all the time, but those are the big ones. A cherry picker is really handy. Otherwise you need some kind of trolley setup or something, but you're going to be taking your motor from car to car to car, and you really want to have a way. I mean, you can use the motor that comes in the car, but you never know what condition those are going to be in. A lot of times we find old cars, we find, you know, cars that have been sitting in fields for 10, 20 years. So you want to get a good drivetrain that's, you know, reliable, and then you just want to take that drivetrain from car to car is really the best way to go, the most reliable way to go, and it saves you money. You know, derby can be a really expensive hobby as well, but there are ways that you can kind of reduce the cost of it if you're smart with some of your gear and some of your equipment. But I would recommend a cherry picker or some kind of trolley. Obviously, the bigger your shop is, the better. Here's another tool that I use all the time, the Sawzall. This is a very handy tool. You're going to be cutting up things like firewalls. On the day of the show, you know, you may be doing, you know, quick repairs. Obviously, a nice floor jack, plenty of jack stands, chocks for the wheels, and then another great tool that's necessary is a torch. So, you know, there's just going to be places that you can't get to with a angle grinder. So I have, it's not a big torch setup because I don't torch a lot, but I would recommend one. And then obviously you'll get to the point where you're kind of building your own tools. This is an I-beam that I use to bend the frame of a car. I can hook a chain to either end, and I can put a jack in the middle, and I can actually use that to bend frames. And you know, if you live in the cold, unforgiving winter like I do in Colorado, then a heater obviously is a good thing to have. Feel free to leave me any suggestions in the comments. Like I said, this was just kind of an intro to my workspace and an intro to me, Rob, the Crud Builder. I will say, to close out the video, just please, anytime you're doing anything in any kind of shop environment, be safe. Don't get crazy. You know, and yeah, we'll see you on the next one. Ciao.